She went excited and said, "It's amazing," when she noticed my large smile. She threw open her mouth, biting down as eagerly as she sucked it in from me. I felt happy too, seeing her expression of excitement. She said, "I feel so incredibly happy," with tears welling up in her eyes when I asked her what she thought. I thought that was the most beautiful smile ever. However, a lot had already transpired before she smiled at me. Sean Taylor, I'm 30 years old. At the cake shop owned by my family, I work as a pastry chef. We were short-staffed since a staff member had quit. After working overtime, I was worn out on this particular day. I chose to live alone since I work at my family's shop, which allowed me to unwind and take things slowly when I got home. The family cake bakery is roughly a 15-minute walk from my apartment. That day, while I was making my way home down the pedestrian bridge's stairs, I fell and lost a step. I think it was because I was feeling really tired and lightheaded. When I hit something, I felt agony at first, but after that, I don't recall anything. That I didn't run into anyone was lucky. My consciousness returned to find that I was being taken to the hospital. A nurse said, "Mr. Taylor, can you hear me?" A common sentence in medical dramas. Faintly aware, I looked in the direction of the voice. The nurse was ready to get her hands on my garments. The white uniform the gorgeous nurse was preparing to strip me of was so tight it was bursting at the seams. I was no different from most males in that we are especially vulnerable when it comes to well-endowed women. I thought she was quite beautiful. Yes, I was just like the nurse who was in front of me. I couldn't remember where I saw her face, but I had the feeling that I had seen it before. Anyway, I felt fortunate to have encountered a lovely nurse, even if I was unaware of the full depth of my own injuries. Then I passed out once more. The next time I woke up, the therapy had already ended and I was completely awake. I had no idea that the stunning nurse I felt fortunate to meet was someone I genuinely knew, even though I was in a haze from being relocated. "Wilson? Margaret Wilson, is that right?" I whispered to the nurse who had been for a visit. With a smile, she waved her name badge above her chest. "That's right. It's been a while. When you were brought in, you didn't react at all, so I thought you had forgotten me." "No. I was just in a daze back then. There's no way I could forget." Yes, it was impossible for me to forget. My first love was her. When we were in elementary school, we were classmates. She was intelligent, compassionate, adorable, and as straight a student. Everyone liked her in our class. I, on the other hand, struggled with learning and was not good at athletics. She was the one that everyone teased all the time. She was always there, quietly supporting me. My first love was her. She was taller than me then, and I had this silly notion that one day I would grow up and tell her how I really felt. However, that day was never to come. When we were in 5th grade, she moved to a new school. It was really abrupt, but I believe she said it was related to her father's new work. I was unable to disclose anything, of course, and all I could say was, "I see you later." It seemed unthinkable to run into my first love again in such a circumstance. Furthermore, I was relieved that she too had recollections of me. She took time out of her hospital stay to come to my room. She even brought food while she wasn't at work. Every day I looked forward to our conversations. The best part of my day was that. However, the discharge day arrived soon. I plucked up the guts to ask for her contact details since I didn't want our leaving to be as simple as "see you later" as it was in elementary school. She immediately agreed when I asked, "Can I have your contact?" I was so scared that I felt she could hear my heart racing. "Of course, that's fine. I've lost touch with all our classmates from back then, so I'm happy that you reached out to me." Her soft grin made it quite evident to me that I had fallen in love with her again. Most likely all she thought of me was that I was a classmate she had reconnected with. I intended to somehow win her over and establish myself as a possible love partner from this point on. That was my thought process. We chatted and texted back and forth after I was released. Furthermore, we began going out to dinner together. Her memories of my elementary school years were mostly embarrassing and awkward stories, such as the time I sobbed because I was forbidden from eating mushrooms, the time I was struck in the face by a basketball pass, or the time I tumbled into a ditch with my school bag and got covered in mud. That didn't stop her from laughing and telling me, "You were cute back then," so I thought it was acceptable to be awkward. I told her how I felt at one of our meals together. I invited Margaret out, and she became quiet. I had tried my luck with a confession, but it was disheartening when she finally murmured, "I'm sorry," in a quiet voice. But I tried to keep a happy face because her expression was serious and she appeared to be remorseful. "No, don't worry about it. I just wanted to express my feelings. I don't think I can be a match for someone like you, Margaret." Margaret was agitated and refuted my statement. "No, it's not like that. It's not that I dislike you or anything." She looked to be trying to express something else. "Is there another reason? If you don't want to say it, that's fine. But if you want to let it out, I'm here to listen." Margaret seems to have made up her mind after hearing what I had to say. She sighed a little and started talking. I was married once. I'm divorced. I got married right after college. He was really kind, and I loved him so much, but he cheated on me. One of the nights I had a night shift, and there was a sudden change in my schedule. I came home and found a woman I didn't know there, and it wasn't the first time. It seemed like he had been bringing women over whenever I had a night shift. I could tell she was trembling because of the way her voice was shaking. Our relationship didn't allow for me to grasp her hand, which angered me. I had no idea until then. After that, it became difficult for me to trust in a relationship. So, I'm sorry. She honestly acknowledged my thoughts and courageously spoke out about her traumatic experiences. I only felt thankful for her. As soon as she found out how I felt, she suggested that we stop talking to each other. I was the one clinging to her for dear life. I said that even if we were just friends again, I wanted to get together. I wanted to cheer up my first love, who had suffered. I rejected your confession. Are you okay with meeting me? I gave that loud, "No way," shake of my head when I heard those words. Naturally, no. She finally cracked a smile at my desperation. Margaret and I kept meeting as friends, just the two of us, after that. It was changed around 6 months later. It all began with a mishap. I was a part of an intoxicated driver's collision into the pedestrian crossing. I instantly reached out to shield the kid who was strolling next to me. It seemed like the automobile hit me and threw me a short distance. I found myself in a hospital room when I became conscious again. It was 2 days after the accident when I woke up. Margaret wasn't at the hospital where I was this time. I was at a different one. My folks were with me instead. I noticed a rush of missed calls and messages from Margaret when I looked at my phone. On the day of the mishap, we were supposed to meet. Her texts, written after 2 days of no communication and being unable to get through, showed concern for my welfare. I called her quickly, but she didn't answer. I contacted the hospital where she worked, even though I knew she was probably at work and didn't want to worry her further. 2 hours later, after I was able to get through to her, she visited my hospital room. My parents had just departed. To be honest, I was shocked to see her that day because I had assumed she wouldn't be available due to her job. "Why are you here? What about work?" She did not, however, respond to my query. Rather, tears started to fall down her cheeks. She didn't answer when I tried to talk to her in a panic. I even offered her tissues so she could stop crying, but she declined. She didn't care if her face got covered in tears as she kept crying. She continued lecturing me nonstop after she had sobbed for as long as she wanted to. "Scene, you get injured way too much. How many times do you have to be taken to the hospital to learn your lesson? She had reprimanded me for the first time. Well, it seemed more like she was lending a hand to someone this time. Help people without getting injured, you idiot. Even though she was frantic and passionate, occasionally her remarks made little sense. But I realized that she was actually concerned about me. She was worried at night and couldn't sleep for the 2 days she couldn't get in touch with me. She left early and hurried to my side as soon as she heard from me at her place of employment. Even though I was attempting to protect a youngster in the accident, I couldn't help but feel guilty for worrying her when I saw how puffy and bagged her eyes were. I felt dead, suddenly, appearing without a word. She emphasized her point, saying, "Let's stop this kind of thing. This will be the last time, okay? I'll be careful from now on. I won't worry you," I further pledged. When she saw me again, she said, almost silently, "This is dangerous." "Huh?" I asked, surprised and speechless. That's when her first smile of the day appeared on her face. "I can't just leave a clumsy person like you alone. I have to keep an eye on you," she stated. "So, you mean like as friends?" I questioned warily. Grinning, Margaret remarked, "As a boyfriend and a girlfriend." I froze for a full 3 seconds before yelling, "Yes," and striking a victorious pose. I had to click the nurse call button since it hurt my broken rib a little, but I was too delighted to care. Margaret and I had an easy relationship after that, and we made the decision to get married a year later. But for the first time since we became romantically involved, Margaret and I had disagreements. It was a few days before our wedding, on the day I got home from work. Margaret had been my roommate for 2 months, and she was always the first to welcome me home from work. Margaret, though, wasn't there to greet me that day. I went into the living room because I felt funny, and I was shocked by what I saw. Margaret was in tears. She was crying silently, her hands over her face. "Dua, what's wrong?" I nervously walked up to Margaret. With tears in her eyes, she withdrew her hands from her face. I had told her I would be late because of work, but I had only arrived home after 10 p.m. "What were you doing? It's so late." "Didn't I tell you it's because of work?" I didn't get Margaret's meaning when she said, "Really? It seems like it's not really work lately. Hasn't it been happening every day? Is the cake shop that busy at this time of year?" Other than work, there was no excuse for me to be late. She should have realized that I didn't have any interests or go on frequent outings with friends. Margaret asked, sobbing, "You're not seeing someone, are you? Like another woman?" And more tears poured down her cheeks. That's when it finally dawned on me that Margaret thought I was cheating. It was accurate to say that during the previous month, I had been working overtime often. Did she carry this worry with her every day? Margaret had already gone through a divorce as a result of her partner's adultery. Upon learning how much I had worried Margaret over the past month, I felt very pitiful. Margaret's hands were firmly in both of mine. "I'm sorry. I started working late suddenly, and it made you anxious." As for me, I was evasive when Margaret asked about the specifics of my overtime work. Whenever I asked for details about your work, you always deflected the question. I wondered if you couldn't tell me. I believe you wouldn't cheat, but because of my past and the fear of being kept in the dark, I felt anxious. Despite my best efforts to make Margaret happy, I wound up hurting her. There was nothing left to do but tell her the truth at this point. I said to Margaret, "Come with me." I worked at my family's cake shop. The refrigerator was filled with samples and drawings of cakes. Looking at the illustrations, Margaret muttered, "Is this a wedding cake?" Yes, I wanted to make our wedding cake myself. I've been thinking about what kind of cake would be good. I wanted to surprise you and make you happy. That's why I couldn't talk much about my overtime work. But it made you anxious, didn't it? Margaret sighed deeply when she heard what I had to say. Maybe all along she had been tense. "I'm sorry for doubting you. It's all right. They say it's common to feel anxious before getting married, and considering your past with your ex-husband, I understand how being kept in the dark can make you anxious. I'm sorry for making you worry. Margaret said, "It's delicious," with a smile on her face after we apologized and she excitedly tasted the cake samples I had cooked. Looking back, we realized that we hadn't spent much time together because we had been so busy getting ready for the wedding and making trial wedding cakes for the surprise. I felt as though I hadn't seen Margaret grin like this in a long time. Margaret seemed unconcerned as she said, "I'm looking forward to the wedding cake." Though it's a shame it wasn't going to be a surprise, Margaret needs to feel at ease. I made a decision to produce the best cake ever at that very moment. I'll do my best, so look forward to it. She looked stunning in her wedding gown on the day of the nuptials, and that was said without prejudice. When Margaret saw my big wedding cake, she was ecstatic. "I made it just for her, so please eat it," I joked, when she replied she couldn't eat it because it was a waste. Margaret and I were smiling with happiness for the first bite, when the bride and groom feed each other cake in front of everyone. Margaret grabbed my hand and gripped the spoon tightly as I scooped up the cake and presented it to her. She then let her mouth drop open and nibbled into the cake. She grinned and added, "I'm so happy. It's the most delicious cake I've ever had. Thank you so much." She was the most stunning person I had ever seen, and I was even more determined to see her happy. I used to believe that I was prone to mishaps and had a bad luck streak, yet I was able to marry such a lovely lady because of my injuries. I'm beginning to believe that I may truly be fortunate. How are things going? As a subscriber, you may help us out with our production. I'll see you in the upcoming video.